Well, a number of years ago, we had somebody on staff here at Lakeside named Derek Flowers, and certainly if you've been around Lakeside for a while, name rings familiar, and you know just what a great guy Derek is and how incredibly talented he is, just an incredible, super musician, great vocalist, just super talented guy, and he served for a while here at Lakeside, and I was privileged to serve alongside of him, and I love working with Derek. Derek's a great guy. And so one of the things that happened over the course of the hiring process is we would call references. And right before we brought him out, we called some references. And one of his references told me something that Derek had not told me. And that is that Derek had recorded a number of songs. And being the inquisitive little fellow that I am, I said, tell me more. Where could I hear some of these songs? And so he gave me a website, and as soon as the phone call was over, I went to that website, and it became very evident why Derek didn't tell me about these songs, because Derek is very talented. These songs were not good, but Derek is a very talented guy. And so I just kept that website and saved it. And after Derek came out and we offered him the job and he signed on and agreed to be part of Lakeside, I looked at him, and after everything was official, I asked him for one more thing. And he said, what's that? And I said, I would like an autographed copy, and I named one of the CDs that he'd put out. And the look on his face was like he had just seen a ghost. And he said, how do you know about that? And I said, don't worry about that, because you never want to reveal your sources. So what I didn't tell Derek at the time is that I saved pretty much every song that was available online. And you fast forward a while, and Derek and I are working together, and we had a good relationship. And so we would occasionally prank one another, and these pranks were always good-natured, but they would escalate a little bit. And so one day I decided, I know that if you know Derek, you know that he hates everything about public broadcasting. Like, he's just not a public broadcasting guy, like the whispery, pretentious voice and trying to sound profound all the time. Not Derek at all. So what I decided to do was start a podcast, and I didn't tell Derek about this. And the podcast was called The Secret Life and Songs of Derek Flowers. And what I decided I would do is talk like a public broadcaster and analyze the songs that Derek didn't want me to know existed. And so I did. I recorded an entire episode called The Old Man and His Gold, because that's what one of the songs was called. And I analyzed the song, and I created a website and started a new email account because I didn't want it linked to my email account. And after I got it published on Spotify, I called Derek into my office and I said, hey, man, I've been listening to this podcast about kind of an underground music scene, knowing that would pique his interest. He's like, oh, cool. Like, what's it about? I'm like, oh, it's just, some underground musicians that haven't really been discovered yet. He's like, oh. I'm like, you want to take a listen? He's like, yeah, of course. And so I played the first one for him, and he wanted to punch me. And that's where it died. Until a couple weeks ago, I got a text from Derek, and it was just a picture of the podcast. And he said, hey, man, remember this? It's still on Spotify. And here's the thing. I don't remember the account that I created to publish the podcast. So even if I wanted to take it down, and I can go either way on that. Like part of me thinks, hey, you should take it down. Part of me thinks, no, I'll leave it up. Because Derek has now started to release some new music. And so when he went to Spotify and typed in his name to play his new music for his friends, the podcast pops up. And so, I can't do anything about it. And part of me thinks, oh, that's really tragic. And another part of me thinks this is the best prank of all time, because I literally can't do anything. And now, until Spotify takes it down, it's up there. So if you want to listen to The Secret Life and Songs of Derek Flowers, it's available on Spotify. There's only one podcast episode. There won't be any more coming. And I don't know if this makes me a great friend or somebody horrible. But either way, Jesus died for great people and horrible people. So not sure what it says about me, but it's there. And I can't do anything about it. So enjoy if you want to. Now, last week, we started looking at Daniel chapter 6, and we saw that there's a king named King Darius. And he had a couple people that he gave great responsibility to oversee all the affairs of the kingdom. And one of them was Daniel. And Daniel did such an incredible job that Darius wanted to elevate Daniel even further. And yet, this bothered people because they wanted the position. And so they looked at Daniel's life and they thought, how can we get rid of Daniel? But what they saw was somebody who operated at all times with complete integrity. And then it dawned on them, there's one way we know we can get rid of Daniel, and that's try to pit Daniel against his relationship with God. And so if we can create a situation where Daniel has to choose, he's going to choose God. And so that's exactly what they did. They went to King Darius and they said, King Darius, you're so incredible. We believe you should issue a decree and make it so that for the next month, no one can worship God or anyone or anything else other than you. King Darius signed off on the decree, and because of the way that the laws were structured, once a decree was issued by the king, it could not be repealed. No matter what, it could not be repealed. Daniel knew about the decree, and yet he still chose to honor God with his life. They observed this, the conspirators, they went back to King Darius, and they reported that Daniel has defied your decree. And King Darius said, there's nothing I can do to get rid of the decree. And that's where we left off, and we're going to pick up today. So if you have your phones or your tablets, I'd invite you to follow along with us this morning in the Bible app. It's a free resource that you can find in whatever app store you utilize on your device. And once you have the Bible app installed on your device, there's a feature that we use together each and every week. It's called the Events feature. You can either enable your locations or write in Lakeside, Algoma will pop up, and you can follow along with us that way. If you have a traditional Bible with you, we are journeying through the book of Daniel. We're going to be looking at the last part of Daniel chapter 6 this morning, starting in verse 14 in just a minute. And if you're joining us via the stream this morning, thanks so much for joining us. My name's Brian. I'm part of the team here at Lakeside, and the verses will be available for you on the screen below as we pick up where King Darius has now been told that Daniel, who you want to elevate, has defied your decree and now facing a death sentence because of what you decreed. Daniel chapter 6, beginning in verse 14, we read these words. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. King Darius went from wanting to be worshiped to panicking. Here is Daniel, the person that he wanted to elevate, to make so important in the kingdom, and now there is nothing he can do to change his circumstances. When we're incapable of changing our circumstances, it forces us to realize our limitations. It forces us to realize our limitations when we find ourselves facing circumstances that we cannot change. Whether that's a diagnosis, whether it's a situation going on at work, whether it's tension with a partner, whenever we find ourselves in a situation that we cannot change, it forces us to confront the fact that we are limited. And so much of our lives we go through thinking we are in control and we are able to do what we want to do. And yet when we find ourselves facing situations and circumstances that we cannot change, it forces us to confront the fact that we are limited. Here is King Darius. He is king. He's trying to figure out a way to spare Daniel from the decree that he has signed, and there's no easy way out of it. It forces him to confront the fact that there are limitations to what even he can do as king. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, "Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed." The king is bothered. He's bothered by what's about to take place. He's bothered by the circumstances and the situations. And yet these other advisors, they don't care. They're getting exactly what they wanted. They wanted Daniel out of their lives. And so here is King Darius, and he's distressed. And rather than rally around the king as his advisors and try to figure out a way that they can find a loophole to get Daniel out of this, that's the last thing they're going to do. They don't care at all. And so they have wanted Daniel out of their lives, and they think this is the way that Daniel will be out of their lives. And then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." Daniel chose to honor God with his conduct, knowing what he was risking, and he is now thrown to the lions. And as he is, King Darius says, "May your God whom you serve continually." And I wonder if people looked at our lives, is this what they would say? Do we live our lives in such a way that no matter the situation, no matter the circumstances, no matter the cost, we choose to serve God in the good times and the bad times? When things are going great in our lives, are we constant in our faith? Are we people that are disciplined then? When things are going great, when things are horrible, when we face circumstances that we wouldn't wish upon anyone else, are we constant in our faith then? Do we continually and systematically walk with God no matter what we're facing? Because a lot of times, faith can become situational. Either when things are great, I'm going to praise God, but as soon as adversity comes, as soon as the hard times arrive, then I feel like God has betrayed me. And I feel like God isn't blessing me as soon as I face difficulty. Or it's just the opposite. That when the good times happen, I'm feeling great. I don't recognize my dependency upon God because I'm focused on everything that's going great. And it's only when all of a sudden I face adversity that I realize the dependency that I have upon God. Is our faith situational? Or is it constant? That throughout the highs and the lows that life will bring us, throughout the situations and the circumstances that we will encounter, that continually, through it all, we follow after and we serve God. May this consistency be the hallmark of our lives, that when people look at us, they would see what King Darius saw when he looked at Daniel. And that when they see us not being swayed by the circumstances and situations that we face, but they see us steadfast in following after God. Is that true about you? And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. There's no escape for Daniel. The pit of the lions where he's been cast, it's been sealed. And then on top of the seal, the king takes his signet ring and he seals the seal. And then the other lords in the community, they come and they also put their rings on it so that it is official. No one can tamper with it. verdict is in, and the punishment has been rendered. And Daniel has been thrown to the lions. And after the ring is used to seal the seal, and King Darius returns to his palace, we're told he's up all night. And some of you can relate, because you face situations where you just can't sleep. The thoughts of the day are racing and they're running through your head. The worries about everything that has transpired are just playing on a loop in your mind. Regrets, circumstances that you wish you could change. And you know how lonely and isolating and exhausting that feels. And yet, contrary to what we would probably suspect, based on where Darius has been and what he's encountered, that's not the sole reason for his inability to sleep. There's even more. Now, you might think to yourself, wait, so if you're the king and you've been played by other advisors who drafted a conspiracy to get rid of the person that you ultimately wanted to appoint into a greater position of power, and you realize you can't trust your closest advisors, and you're about to lose the very person that you were going to put all of this responsibility into their hands, what more would keep you up at night than that? Well, we're given the answer in the next couple of verses. Then at break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of the lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve, continually been able to deliver you from the lions?" See, the first thing in the morning, King Darius goes to the den. The only reason you go to the den first thing in the morning is if somewhere in the back of your mind you think some way, somehow, God is going to do the miraculous. Some way, somehow, God is going to spare the life of this man that has been thrown to the lions. First thing in the morning, there's no point in going to something that you know has already been finalized and of defeat. See, King Darius, he's searching. He's searching. And the reason he couldn't sleep ultimately is revealed to us in his actions the very next morning. And some of you are there right now. You've excelled in the same way Darius has. You've reached the pinnacle. And yet, it's just not enough. And you don't know why. And it's infuriating. Because every dream and every goal that you've set out for yourself, you've accomplished. And you've achieved it. But you're still wanting. And the satisfaction that should be there from rising in the ranks, from falling in love, from growing your portfolio, it's still left of emptiness and a void. And you are actively searching for, why do I have this emptiness? Other people, it's just the opposite. You don't know why you're searching. But you just know there's a restlessness. And you don't even know why you're here, honestly. There's just this restlessness that you can't explain. And there's something more. You know there's something more, but you just can't put your finger on what that more is. It's driving you nuts. King Darius is in the midst of trying to find out, is God real? Is the God that Daniel's life has been defined by, is he at work? Can he work even in the midst of this situation and this circumstance? And so he goes first thing in the morning. And the question on his mind is, has God intervened? Is God at work? And then Daniel, verse 21, said to the king, O king, live forever. And I hope you see the irony in this response. Because if you were with us when we looked at the first part of Daniel chapter 6, this is the phrase that the other advisors used to go to King Darius in the first place and convinced him to issue the decree that made it illegal for 30 days' time for anyone to worship God or anyone or anything else. And now King Darius has issued the decree. Daniel's been thrown into the lion's den. King Darius wants to know, is this God that Daniel serves, is he real? Is he at work? And he goes to the den and he cries out to Daniel asking, has God worked? And the response of Daniel is, O king, live forever. My God, verse 22 says, sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths. And they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. I want you to see what Daniel does. He tells King Darius how God has worked. As Darius runs to the lion's den and cries out, asking if God has spared Daniel somehow, Daniel responds, and then he immediately launches in to how God provided, how he sent an angel to protect him, how the angel shut the lions' mouths, and how Daniel was there unharmed. Daniel tells Darius his story. I know sometimes you feel just this incredible desire for everyone to experience what you have experienced. Following after God has made such a difference in your life. Your relationship with Jesus has transformed you and it has changed you, and you desperately want everyone to experience the same thing that you've experienced as a result of following after God. And yet, there's this hesitancy. And the hesitancy is, well, I'm not a pastor. And I don't know if I can really explain it all perfectly. or explain all the details in the way I should. And what happens is we allow ourselves to get to this place of paralysis with our story of what God has done in our lives because we convince ourselves, well, I'm not good enough. I don't have the answer to every question, and so I don't know what I would say, and then we just shut down. And we effectively silence ourselves from sharing with people what God has done for us, in us, and through us. And what I want you to see here is, yes, this is a miraculous experience. But notice what Daniel does. He tells King Darius what he encountered and what he experienced. He doesn't go into great detail about the angel, how the angel arrived, how God in his sovereignty sent the angel. He doesn't go into that. He says, here is what I encountered. Here is what I experienced. If Jesus has transformed your life, if God has changed you, then you have a responsibility. And the responsibility is to share that hope. And quit allowing the fact that you think, well, I don't have all the answers. Quit allowing that to stop you. Don't allow yourself to be silenced. The admonition we're given is be ready at all times to give an account, to give a reason for the hope that we've experienced. So share the transformation that has gone on in your life. Share what God has done in and through you. And if there are questions you don't know the answer to, God is big enough to provide answers either supernaturally through the Holy Spirit in that moment or through other means and other people. And it's okay for you to say, I don't know. I'm not really sure. But don't allow your story to be silenced. Daniel tells King Darius what he encountered and what he experienced. And Darius brings Daniel out of the lion's den. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Now, I realize that can cause a visceral reaction when you hear about that. Not only was it the advisors who were thrown to the lions, but their wives and their children as well. Remember this, the consequences for sin are always dire. They're always dire. And we like to play this game where we can flirt around with it and where we can do it to the consequences for sin are always dire. But also know this. One of the functions of government is to administer punishments. And this isn't just an Old Testament concept. This is reinforced for us in Romans chapter 13. And one of the points of the government being established in God's design in Romans 13 is that the government would wield the sword. And part of punishment is to be utilized as a deterrent. Now, I'm not saying that throwing their wives and their children and them to the lions isn't barbaric, but what I am saying is there are always consequences for our sin, and that God has established government to rule over the people. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. So there was a decree that was issued, and the first decree was that Darius would be worshiped. And now there is a new decree, and the new decree is that people would worship the true God. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. Darius looks at how God has worked and orchestrated the situation and the circumstances that Daniel has found himself in. And what is he taken away with? That God is living, that he endures forever, that God and God alone is the king who will live and reign forever, that every other king and every other kingdom, it will rise and it will fall. Every other kingdom will rise and fall, but God's kingdom will rule and reign forevermore. That God delivers, that he rescues, that he's active, and that he saves. And the greatest thing that God saves us from is from our sin. There is a greater deliverance that God gave to Daniel than from delivering him from the lions. And it is the deliverance that he offers to each and every one of us and anyone who would receive it. It's the salvation from our sins. God's the creator. He gets to make the rules. He set the standard, and his standard is perfection. And none of us measure up to that standard. And the problem is, it doesn't matter how good we are. The problem is, it doesn't matter how much good we do. Because once we're imperfect, we can never become perfect. But in the midst of our rebellion, in the midst of our brokenness, in the midst of our sin, God sent his son, Jesus, full divinity and full humanity on display in one. And Jesus came, and he was perfect. And he met the standard that none of us could measure up to. And he taught us how to be faithful. He taught us how to love. He taught us how to follow after God. But he wasn't just a great teacher. He was fully God and fully human. The two natures as one. And so he lived the perfect life that none of us can measure up to and none of us can live. And then he went and he was ultimately crucified. He was ultimately killed. And he was killed because the cost of sin is death. And so all of my imperfection and all of your imperfection was transferred onto Jesus, who was our substitute. That he became, he carried all of my imperfection. He became my sin, though he had no sin in that moment as he was crucified, so that he would pay the punishment and the penalty once and for all. And he died on the cross. And 3 days later, he rose again and appeared to over 500 witnesses. Because the cost of our sin, it's death. But the gift of God is that we could live forever in a renewed and restored relationship with him. That we could be part of the kingdom that will rule and reign forevermore. And so God offers us, and any who will accept it, deliverance and freedom. Romans tells us that if you will confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. It's not because of you. It's not because of what you can do. But it's because God has offered us deliverance from the greatest problem that we face. That God saves. And that's why Jesus came. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So Daniel would serve Darius. And then he'd serve the next king, Cyrus. And that brings the count to 4. 4 kings that Daniel would serve. And he prospered under them all. Because what Daniel understood is God is in control. He's in control of who's in control. He's in control of our circumstances. God delivered Daniel. But the greatest deliverance of God for Daniel was not from the lions, but it was from his sin. And that's the same deliverance that is offered to every single one of us because of what Jesus has done. And the only question we have to answer is, God, will we accept your deliverance? God, I pray that we would recognize, no matter the situations and circumstances we face, that you are in control and you are greater. God, I pray for the person that's been questioning and searching and knows that there's a void. And God, I pray that once and for all they would recognize that the reason that there's that void in their lives is because they were designed with a greater purpose. And that's to live for you. God, I pray today, I pray right now would be the moment where they stop running and they embrace the fact that you have offered to deliver them from the greatest problem they will ever face, their sin. So in the quietness of this moment, God, I pray that they would welcome you into their lives, acknowledging their sin and their imperfection, and highlighting the fact that you came to save us and set us free. That they would acknowledge that you were crucified. 3 days later rose again, and choose to live for you, that they would confess with their mouths that Jesus is Lord and believe in their hearts that God raised him from the dead. And God, for those of us who've made that decision, may we walk with you so that when people look at our lives, they would see us walk with you continually. Be honored and glorified, Jesus, we pray in your name.